Welcome back. Of course, this is a special edition of Open Your Eyes. We're broadcasting live from the Placentia Hotel as a part of our continued coverage of the 27th Intersessional Conference of the Heads of Governments of CARICOM. Now, of course, in addition to having the different delegations from member states here, we also have some international press, and we've been able to snag one of the senior journalists from Trinidad to join us this morning. This is Andy Johnson. Good morning.
Good morning.
And you're a journalist and broadcaster currently with Trinidad Express.
Yeah, I'm doing some work with the Express. Again, that's sort of my home base for most of the 45 years that I've been in the media, believe it or not. Yeah. So I'm back there after I spent the last 5 years working for the last government in Trinidad and Tobago as head of an information agency. But it's good to be here, and from the day that I saw that this meeting was going to take place here, I endeavored to come for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. One of which is that I wanted to do some work on getting to know more about a man named Lee Richardson, who was somebody I met when I was just a kid in the business. He was working for the Guardian newspapers in Trinidad, and people used to talk about his aura then, mm-hmm. And describing him as a former premier of Belize, which was not the case, but he was political leader of a party, which then Mr. George Price inherited and became the chief minister and then prime minister of Belize. And he was a senior writer in Guardian at the time, and I read the book by Godfrey Smith on about George Price, and Lee Richardson is talked about in there in a way that made me develop new respect and greater respect for him. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons why, yes.
This particular trip will be an exploratory visit in terms of making connections for a larger piece on Lee Richardson.
Certainly, yeah. And then, I can't remember if it's in primary school or in secondary school, you learn the geography and the history of some parts of the region, and so I knew about the place when it was British Honduras, and the capital of British Honduras was Belize, and when you became independent, the country's name became Belize, and then the capital became Belize City, and it was always fascinating. So it is a country in Central America that was a British colony, and where people speak English as their first language, and it's something that was interesting to me in the same way that Guyana is a country in South America where, again, they speak English and where they play cricket. I'm not sure to what extent you play cricket in
the rural areas. Yes. We do, yes.
yeah, there's some fascinating stuff. And then I got to meet Prime Minister Barrow some years ago when he was sort of central in one of the things that I want to talk with some people about here. And one of the objectives, the conversation you had a while ago with the Foreign Minister was great. But I wanted to find out from him, for instance, where we are, and some of those things. Sometimes things get onto the CARICOM meeting agendas and then stay there, and then they fall off. One of them is the whole issue of what was called then options for governance. In 2009, Prime Minister Barrow was part of a team working with then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Patrick Manning, about that, moving the region together sort of politically closer than it is. And I see that I was looking over the files yesterday and see that there is one of the leaders, a part of their portfolio, this thing called the CARICOM quasi-cabinet, dealing with the question of monetary union. And again, that was an agenda item going back to the 1980s, where they were talking about establishing a common currency in CARICOM. At one point it was on the front burner, and then it went to the back burner. No one knows where it is, and all these things are important in the general idea of union of one sort or another in CARICOM. So there are all these issues that continue to hold our interest and are requiring attention just like any other.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that. I think one of the things that we aim to do, especially with our programming, is being able to keep the issue of integration on the forefront, reminding our viewers and Belizeans that it is pertinent to them.
Yes.
In terms of the context in Trinidad, do you find it to be where there is interest in this issue?
Yes, there are those people for whom it is interesting. For instance, a conversation with the Foreign Minister about the implications of the CSM and sometimes how populations would rebel against it, but at the same time calling for action on it. And those are one of the things, the extent to which that is the implication of union, whether it's political, social, economic, you know, people have to understand that if we're talking about an integrated region, then it will require people moving from country to country, place to place, looking for jobs and opportunities of one kind or another. And I like this point about information. Sometimes it's up to the governments to provide more information to the populations and to help them understand the process and to accept it more.
I did appreciate him acknowledging that there is a role for government to be able to facilitate in between. Resources will always be a concern, but it is important that they can be able to help connect the bridge.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm glad that you're joining us at this time, but what we do have to do, as you can tell, is take a very quick break, and we will be back then to have our conversation with the Executive Director of CARFA, so stay tuned.